The night settles slowly over Athens, as if the sky itself were drawing a soft cloak around the city, and you find yourself already within its quiet, breathing heart, sheltered beneath the great dark outline of the Acropolis above. In the small room where you sit, walls of plaster glow dimly in the mild light of a single clay lamp, its flame wavering and then steadying again, stretching shadows along the floor of packed earth and worn stone. Outside, the last murmurs of the day have faded into a low, distant hush, leaving only this gentle, warm pool of light around you and the sense that the city, which was so loud under the sun, is exhaling, relaxing, falling inward into itself. You breathe with it, unhurried, letting your shoulders loosen as the perfumed smoke of a little twig of dried herb curls up near the lamp, tracing invisible paths in the air. The day's dust still lingers faintly on your skin, a grainy memory along your forearms and your feet, but the heat that baked the streets has softened into something tender and forgiving. You listen, for a moment, to the small sounds of night inside the house, the wooden door settling on its hinges, a faint creak from a beam overhead, the almost inaudible whisper of cloth as someone in another room turns over in their sleep. The world is smaller now, closer, wrapped in darkness and lamplight, and in this quiet you feel the city inviting you to wander through it in thought and in footsteps, slowly, softly, as if walking through a dream. For a little while longer you sit where you are, watching the oil in the lamp tremble as the flame bends and then straightens once more, its light reflected in the curved, smoke-darkened interior of the clay. The light is not strong, but you do not need much now. The night is a friend, and it does not insist on clarity. Outside the open doorway, a rectangle of deeper darkness frames the street, and beyond that, higher still, you sense rather than see the pale shoulders of marble and stone that crown the sacred hill. Somewhere up there, on the Acropolis, the great temples keep their silent watch, their columns catching the faintest touch of starlight, while the city below curls quietly at their feet. When you rise, you do it without hurry, as though you are simply following the slow lifting of your own breath. Your hand passes over the rough texture of the wall as you move, feeling small bumps in the plaster, places where hands and time have worn it smooth, places where it still holds the craftsman's marks. The lamp in your hand steadies you as much as you steady it, its little flame answering the night with a soft and patient glow. You step toward the doorway, toward the sleeping city, and in that moment, it feels as though all of Athens, from the darkened agora to the quiet workshops and shrines, is waiting peacefully for you to walk through it and listen to its gentle, dreaming silence. Outside, the air greets you like cool water poured over warm stone, easing the last residue of the day's heat from your skin. The narrow street is a corridor of soft darkness, framed by the pale, irregular surfaces of houses on either side, their walls catching the faint light of your lamp and answering with a muted, chalky sheen. Overhead, the sky spreads wide and deep, a long, dark dome pricked with stars that seem to float just above the invisible line of the Acropolis, as if the sacred hill were cradling them nearer to the earth. Your sandals, worn and familiar, brush lightly over the ground as you step into the lane, the sound of your footsteps small and dry against the packed earth and scattered stones. Here and there, a closed wooden door leans inward from its frame, faintly outlined, with a strip of darker shadow along the threshold where the step has been worn down by years of coming and going. From behind one door, you hear the soft, rhythmic murmur of someone's breathing, perhaps joined by another, perhaps by the tiny sound of a child turning in their sleep. From another, there is only silence, full and simple, as if the house itself were resting. A faint breeze moves along the street like a shy guest, stirring a hanging reed mat and brushing against your face with the scent of dust. Olive wood, and faraway smoke. It carries a suggestion of something else as well, something cleaner and cooler that has traveled down from the hills or come up from the sea, weaving its way between the stones and up past your cheeks. Above the roofs, the darker silhouette of the Acropolis rises, not sharp, but massive and reassuring, a familiar guardian shape watching over the clustered houses below. You walk slowly down the lane, letting the night decide your pace, your lamp drawing a small oval of golden light that slides gently across the ground and up the walls as you pass. A shadow moves against a rooftop, and for a moment you think of something larger, but it is only a cat, pausing to watch you with pale eyes that catch your lamplight, then stepping away with the quiet confidence of a creature that knows every tile and ledge. Its tail disappears behind a low parapet, and the silence settles once more, that soft, comforting silence in which every slight sound is a friendly whisper rather than a threat. Soon you reach a small courtyard where the lane widens, a space shared by several houses whose whitewashed walls lean toward one another like old friends in conversation. A tall, narrow fig tree grows near the center, its trunk stretching up from a square of bare earth, leaves forming a dark canopy that rustles gently overhead. At its roots lies a shallow basin, carved from stone, where rainwater collects when the sky is generous. Tonight, there is only a thin layer reflecting your lamp as a trembling, golden patch. You pause beneath the fig tree, lifting your face slightly as a leaf brushes your hair in the faint wind. The smell of the tree is subtle but present, a green, living note against the dry mineral scent of stone. At the edge of the courtyard, a small clay jar has been left near a doorway, its rounded side cool to the touch, its lid slightly askew. You do not open it, but you feel the smoothness of its surface with your fingertips, tracing the faint grooves where some potter's hands once turned it on a wheel. These quiet objects feel like companions in the night, each holding a piece of someone's life, someone's small routines and hopes. From a nearby window, half covered by a woven cloth, a sliver of lamplight escapes, cutting a thin line across the darkness and falling onto the ground at a gentle angle. Inside, a soft voice murmurs a final phrase, perhaps finishing a story told to a child, or a prayer sent to a god whose presence the speaker imagines in the stillness above. The cloth moves a little as the air shifts, and the line of light trembles as if it, too, is breathing. After a moment, the voice is quiet, and you are left with the fading echo of words you cannot quite hear, only feel. In the corner of the courtyard stands a small wooden bench under the eaves of one house, its surface worn smooth by years of sitting and waiting. You imagine the people who gather there in the cool of mornings, sharing bread and small talk before the day pulls them apart, and those who return here at dusk, shoulders heavy with work, to lay down their burdens in simple, shared silence. Now, the bench is empty, and the silence it holds is of a different kind, wide, open, patient. You could sit there if you wished, letting the night fill the spaces between your thoughts, but some quiet thing within you invites you onward, gently urging you to follow the soft slope of the street as it continues around the corner and deeper into the sleeping city. At the turning of the lane, you notice a simple stone pillar set into the wall at a crossroads, a rough-hewn block rising from the ground with a carved face looking out toward the path. By day, such herms watch over travelers and thresholds, markers of protection and guidance. By night, they seem to blend into the shadows, yet their presence is still reassuring. The face, worn by weather and touch, catches the low light of your lamp, and for a moment its features appear to stir, not in movement, but in memory, as if all the glances and prayers offered here in passing have left a softness in the stone. At the base of the pillar, someone has left a small offering, a few olive leaves laid carefully together. Their surface is already losing the fresh shine of the day, and a fragment of bread, slightly hardened at the edges. Nearby, a tiny clay cup rests on the ground, just a simple piece with a chipped rim, the inside stained from wine poured and dried. The sight of these modest gifts does something gentle inside of you, a reminder that the vastness of the gods, however one imagines them, meets people most often in these small moments, a crumb of bread, a whisper at a crossroads, a touch of lips to worn stone. You stand there for a while, letting your eyes adjust to the darker spaces where your lamplight does not reach. The night presses close, but not in a heavy way. It feels more like a cloak around your shoulders, a presence that muffles harsh edges and leaves only the soft, round shapes of things. Somewhere further down the lane, a dog gives a single low bark, then decides, perhaps, that nothing important demands its attention, and the sound dissolves into the air. A faint clink of pottery from another courtyard suggests someone setting a cup aside before sleep, and then that, too, is gone. As you turn away from the hum, you lightly brush your fingers against the stone, a companionable gesture, not so much a prayer as a greeting. The stone is cool, slightly rough against your skin, holding the day's heat only in the faintest trace deep inside. Your lamp throws your shadow across the wall as you walk, stretching it out and pulling it back in again with each step, and ahead of you, the lane begins to open, tilting gently upward toward the dark bulk of the sacred hill, where temples and shrines keep their silent vigil under the stars. The street widens into a sloping way that leads toward the lower approaches of the Acropolis, stones underfoot becoming more uneven, more ancient, as though you are shifting from the soft, domestic heart of the city into a zone where the earth remembers older footsteps. Your sandals find their places among the worn grooves and shallow depressions left by countless feet before yours, and the sensation of walking here feels less like moving through space and more like joining a long, unbroken procession that stretches backward into time. On your left, a low wall of roughly fitted stones follows the curve of the path, its top lined with tufts of grass and small plants that have found purchase in the cracks. On your right, the land drops slightly, revealing darker shapes of houses clustered lower down, their roofs blending into a single shadowed mass. Above everything, the Acropolis rises, now more clearly a distinct shape against the sky, a great plateau of rock crowned by faintly glowing forms, where bits of marble catch the distant light of the moon and stars. You do not see the fine carvings or the bright colors that the daylight reveals, instead you sense the outline, the presence, the weight of centuries gathered into this single looming silhouette. Here and there along the path, small niches in the rock hold offerings. You notice one where a tiny lamp burns with a flame so small and steady it seems almost unreal, tucked into the stone as if into the palm of an enormous hand. Someone lit it not long ago, perhaps after dark, perhaps in the last quiet hours before the city turned inward to sleep. The odor of the oil is faintly sweet and smoky, mixing with the crisp smell of rock that has cooled after a long, sunlit day. You breathe it in, feeling how the air up here is just a little clearer, a little freer from the dust and breath of the crowded streets below. As you continue, the sounds of the city fade even more. Occasional murmurings reach you from distant houses, but they are indistinct, like voices heard across water. The dominant sound now is your own movement and the gentle grind of stone underfoot. You become aware of your breathing as another rhythm in the night, rising and falling in a slow, even pattern, matching the incline of the path and the relaxed pace of your steps. Somewhere above, a night bird calls once, a short, questioning sound, then settles again into silence. The sky seems closer here, the stars hanging low as if drawn by the quiet gravity of the sacred rock, and for a brief moment you imagine that the whole city is sleeping under a great, watchful gaze that is both human and more than human, shaped by the hands and hopes of those who built these shrines and by something older that lived in the hill long before. You come to a small terrace where the path flattens, forming a kind of balcony overlooking a portion of the city below. A low stone wall marks the edge, and when you rest your hands on it, your palms feel the coolness that the night has already begun to lay upon the stone. From here, the houses appear as a scattered, dark mosaic, their roofs like overlapping tiles in a pattern that only the gods, perhaps, could fully see. Scattered among them are marks of light, a window still open, a doorway with a lamp just inside, a faint glow leaking up through the slats of a roof where someone keeps a small flame alive. You lean slightly forward, and the city's nighttime sounds reach you in a layered, softened way. Somewhere far to the west, toward the harbor, there is a faint, distant rumble, perhaps a late cart or the creak of rigging on a ship shifting against its moorings. Closer, you catch fragments of human sound, a laugh that drifts up from a courtyard like a bubble rising and bursting on the surface of a pond, the murmur of a conversation slipping around a corner and then dissolving, a stray tune hummed very quietly as someone finishes a task by lamplight. None of these sounds demands anything from you, they simply rise and fall like the breath of the city, and you listen without needing to act, only to be. Turning your head, you see the Acropolis rising more steeply to your side, its slopes dotted with shrubs and small trees whose leaves shine faintly in the sky's pale light. A narrow stairway carved into the rock climbs toward the grander entrance above, but at this hour it is empty, the priests and caretakers resting, the sanctuaries locked in their own intense, quiet stillness. You know that within those temples stand images of deities, carved in stone and cast in bronze, clothed and ornamented by the devotion of generations, but tonight you sense them not as commanding figures but as presences that have grown very still, listening, perhaps, to the same night sounds that reach your ears. You let your eyes close for a moment, not because you are tired of the view, but because the darkness behind your eyelids is deeper, more complete, and in it you can feel the city not as something you look at but as something that surrounds you, holds you, like water holds a swimmer. The stone under your hands, the air against your face, the distant whisper of life below and above, all of it folds into a single, gentle awareness. When you open your eyes again, nothing has changed in any dramatic way, and yet the world seems even quieter, as if the night has leaned a little closer in. Leaving the terrace, you follow a side path that slips gently away from the more formal approach to the hill and winds down among smaller sanctuaries and modest shrines built along the slope. The ground here is uneven, a patchwork of rock, earth, and rough-laid stones, and your lamplight brushes over fragments of old walls, low altars, and the occasional column base half swallowed by time. It is a liminal space, half sacred, half domestic, where the lines between temple and home blur into the shared reverence woven through the city's fabric. You come upon a small shrine tucked against the rock, little more than a niche with a narrow ledge in front of it, but clearly cared for. Candles have burned there at different times, leaving wax drips that have flowed and hardened along the stone like pale, frozen streams. Someone has placed a short garland of dried flowers across the ledge, the petals curled inward and paper-thin, their scent long gone but their shape still delicately intact. A tiny clay figurine stands in the center, too simple to show many details, yet suggestive of a protective presence, arms faintly raised or perhaps folded. The air near the shrine feels slightly different, not heavier, but more focused, as if many quiet thoughts have stopped briefly here and left behind a warmth that does not depend on temperature. You lift your lamp a little higher, and the light presses gently into the niche, revealing traces of colored paint on the stone, faint reds, faded blues, the remains of some once bright pattern that has slowly yielded to wind and years. You do not try to decipher it, it is enough to know that, once, hands carefully traced those lines, eyes followed them with attention, and someone's heart rested there with a sense of nearness to what they revered. For a time, you stand and simply breathe beside the shrine, your own thoughts quieting not into blankness but into a calm, spacious awareness. The night around you holds many such places, where stone and intention meet, and you can almost imagine a web of invisible threads connecting them, from household altars to grand temples, from little offerings at crossroads to the great processions that climb this hill by daylight. In the dark, all of these seem to relax, loosen their ceremonial stiffness, and become more like what they truly are, expressions of human hope and gratitude folded into the enduring body of the city. Eventually you let the path carry you down toward the flatter ground where the agora lies, the open space at the city's heart that, by day, thrums with voices, footsteps, and the constant exchange of goods and ideas. At night, however, it is another world entirely, broad and mostly empty, its structures turning inward, its stone pavements holding only the lightest echo of those daytime crowds. You approach from a side street that opens onto the edge of the square, your lamp casting its small halo across the threshold between the clustered houses and the wider, more formal openness of the civic space. As you step out, the scale of the agora reveals itself in a new way. Without the moving bodies and shouting sellers, the area feels larger, the distances between buildings stretched, the colonnades taller and more imposing in their silence. The stoa, that long, columned shelter where people gather to talk, trade, and take refuge from both sun and sudden rain, now stands like a sleeping beast along one side of the square, its columns forming a patient, repeating rhythm against the darkness. A few lamps still burn there, small points of amber light within the forest of shafts and shadows, perhaps left by a caretaker finishing late work or by someone reluctant to part too quickly from the day's companionship. You walk more slowly here, your footsteps sounding different on the flatter, larger stones, a soft, hollow tap that seems to float a little before it fades. The air in the agora is slightly cooler, more open, threaded with faint scents, the lingering sweetness from a stall that sold honeyed cakes earlier, the sharper hint of wine that was spilled and dried on the ground, the dry, grainy smell of the sand and dust that have settled into the cracks between the stones. You can almost see the ghosts of recent activity, a man laughing as he empties his purse for a purchase, a woman adjusting the position of her jars, a group of youths arguing passionately about something that mattered fiercely in that moment and now has dissolved into the quiet. On one side of the square, a small altar catches your attention, its surface smooth from the hands that have rested there in prayer, its edges worn soft. A faint white trace of ash remains in the shallow hollow where offerings are burned, and the smell of smoke is only a memory. You approach it and rest your hand gently on the cool stone, feeling its solidity, the way it holds both the warmth of human contact and the impersonal endurance of rock. Beyond the altar, the open sky stretches unhindered, and above the rooftops you can still see the darker shape of the Acropolis, like a second, higher city watching over this one, guardian and symbol all at once. The square is not entirely empty. At one corner, a figure wrapped in a cloak passes slowly along the line of the colonnade, their footsteps barely touching the ground, a small lamp in their hand echoing your own. You do not call out, and neither do they, there is no need. Each of you is enclosed in your own soft bubble of light, moving through the same shared stillness, and that is a kind of quiet companionship that suits the hour. You watch their lamp recede, one glowing point moving between the rhythmic shadows, until it disappears around a corner and leaves the agora once again in its wide, breathing dark. Drawn by the sheltering line of columns, you make your way toward the stoa, stepping up onto its slightly raised floor where stone gives way to a smoother, worn surface that has felt countless feet. Here, even at night, you can sense the way sound behaves differently, voices during the day, you imagine, bouncing lightly between the facing walls, intensifying the murmur of discussion and debate. Now, your footsteps are the only movement, and they create a soft, contained echo that returns to you quickly, as if not wanting to stray too far. Your lamplight plays along the shafts of the columns, revealing shallow grooves and occasional imperfections where stone met chisel and time. In some places, faint traces of paint cling to the surface, a hint of red here, a shadow of blue there, reminders that these structures, so pale and monochrome in your imagination, once wore colors that have nearly all been washed away by weather and years. Between the columns, the night stretches outward, framing glimpses of the open square, the distant shapes of other buildings, and the wide, protective curve of the sky. About halfway down the stoa, you find a stone bench running along the wall. Its edge has been softened by generations of people sitting, leaning, thinking, and waiting. You lower yourself onto it, the stone at first cool against the backs of your legs before your warmth begins to flow slowly into it. You set the lamp beside you, its glow spreading gently over the bench and the lower parts of the nearby columns, leaving the higher reaches in deeper shadow. From this low vantage, the columns feel even taller, their tops disappearing into a darkness that merges with the roof and then with the night beyond. You sit there for a while, letting your mind drift among imagined scenes. You see the stoa filled with citizens, their voices rising and falling like waves as they discuss matters of laws and alliances, grain and ships, festivals and family disputes. You see a philosopher leaning against a column, turning a small concept over in his hands like a pebble, examining it from different angles and words, while his students listen with varying degrees of attention. You see children darting between the columns, weaving games through the adult legs, their laughter ringing against the stone. All of it seems to hover in the air as a faint afterimage, gently fading in the face of the deeper, slower presence of the night. As the imagined scenes recede, you grow more aware of your own stillness. Your breathing has grown smoother, the muscles in your face and shoulders unwinding another small degree every time you exhale. The lamp beside you flickers once, its flame bending under a whisper of air that finds its way along the corridor of the stoa, then steadies again. You watch that small flame, noting how it never truly stands immobile but constantly shifts, tiny movements within narrow bounds, a quiet dance of light and shadow that mirrors the subtle restlessness of your own thoughts gradually coming to rest. After some unhurried time on the bench, you rise and let your feet guide you toward the far end of the stoa, where a side passage opens into quieter side streets and smaller clusters of buildings. This part of the city feels more intimate than the vast openness of the agora, as though you are returning to the folds and seams in the fabric rather than the broad, central panel. The buildings crowd closer together here, and the sky narrows again above you, still full of stars but framed now by the irregular lines of rooftops and eaves. You pass a structure that, by day, serves as a place for official business, a council building where decisions are weighed and recorded, but at this hour it is as silent as stone can be. Its doors are firmly shut, its inner chambers empty of voices, and the tablets and scrolls that normally command so much attention rest in the dark. You move by with a lightness in your step, feeling grateful that tonight the burdens of such matters do not lie on your shoulders. The city, for all its complexity of law and custom, feels, in this quiet, like a single living being that has sunk into a restful sleep. The lane bends gently, and you find yourself entering a neighborhood where workshops cluster side by side, potters, perhaps, and metalworkers, their signs faintly visible above shuttered entrances. The smell here is distinct, even after the fires have been banked and the tools laid aside, the earthy imprint of clay, the dry tang of dust, the metallic echo of cooled bronze. A kiln, now dark, looms at the edge of a yard, its mouth black and still, the bricks around it bearing the subtle gradient of colors that many firings have painted there over time. On a low table outside one workshop, several newly formed pots have been left to dry, their surfaces pale and slightly powdery, catching your lamplight in a soft, matte glow. You approach them, careful not to disturb their carefully arranged positions, and you feel an almost reverent tenderness toward these simple shapes. Bowls, jars, little cups, each meant to hold something nourishing or precious, each carrying within it the quiet labor of hands that shaped and smoothed them while the wheel turned and the day progressed. Tonight, they hold only air and potential, resting under the watchful eye of the stars. As you move on, the faint clink of something shifting in the dark makes you pause. A small shape, perhaps a mouse or a lizard, scurries quickly from one pile of scrap wood to another, disappearing into a crack that has probably sheltered countless tiny creatures before. The city, even in its stillness, is full of such hidden lives, most of them with concerns far simpler and more immediate than the plans and arguments that fill the daylight hours. This thought comes to you not as a contrast but as a gentle reminder that existence has many layers, all sharing the same cool air and the same sky. The street gradually slopes downward again, leading you away from the workshops and into a quieter residential area, where the houses sit a little farther apart and small courtyards open here and there like pockets of breathing space. The night feels deeper here, the silence thicker, yet not oppressive. It's as if this part of the city is wrapped in an extra layer of calm, the noises of the day having retreated even further into memory. You pass a low wall over which an olive tree leans, its twisted trunk and silvered leaves forming a soft, shifting pattern against the sky. The breeze stirs the branches, and the leaves whisper against one another, producing a gentle, flowing sound like water sliding over stone. A few olives, ripened and dark, cling still to the stems, their shapes barely distinguishable in the dim light. One has fallen to the ground and rests in a small hollow near the base of the tree, a tiny, dark presence against the lighter earth. In the courtyard beyond, you can just make out the outline of a small altar set against the wall, likely dedicated to household gods or ancestors. A tiny lamp glows faintly there, a smaller, more fragile light even than the one you carry. Its flame leans to one side, then stands upright again, tracing minute arcs of brightness in the air. Someone, before withdrawing to sleep, has taken the time to light it, to whisper a few words over its new flame, perhaps in thanks for the day just past or in hope for whatever tomorrow will bring. The sincerity of such a small act lingers in the courtyard like a warmth that has nothing to do with temperature. A clay jar stands nearby, and beside it a pair of sandals has been placed side by side, as if carefully aligned by their owner's hand in a habitual gesture of order. The sight of them, waiting there for the morning, carries a quiet promise that life will resume its familiar rhythms when the sun returns, that feet will slip back into those sandals, that water will be drawn from the jar, that someone will step out into the day with the simple intention of doing what needs to be done. For now, however, all of these future actions remain folded into the stillness, resting like seeds in the dark soil of night. You breathe in slowly, feeling the softness of the air as it fills your lungs and then leaves them again. The faint smell of olive leaves, clay, and distant smoke blends into a single, gentle impression, and your thoughts drift like the leaves, moving without urgency from one image to the next. Your body continues its unhurried walk, feet carrying you along the lane, while your mind floats behind slightly, as if watching your own steps from a small distance, content and increasingly quiet. Not far ahead, you hear the subtle trickle of water, a musical sound that stands out delicately against the broader silence. Following it, you discover a public fountain house framed by a modest facade, its doorway open even at this hour. The structure offers a pocket of coolness, and as you step inside, the air changes around you, carrying the fresh, clean scent of moving water, stone dampened by continual flow, and a faint hint of algae that clings to surfaces always kissed by droplets. Within, a stone basin runs along one wall, its edge smoothed by many hands resting there as people have filled jars and cups over the years. An aqueduct or spring, hidden from view, feeds a steady, quiet flow into the basin through a carved spout shaped like a simple lion's head, its mouth forever pouring the city's lifeblood into waiting vessels. The water falls in a thin, clear stream, creating ripples that spread in widening circles across the surface before returning to stillness at the far end. Your lamp reflects in the moving surface, its light broken into shifting, elongated fragments that dance along the damp walls. You approach and rest both hands on the cool stone of the basin's edge, leaning slightly over to listen more closely to the sound of the water. It is soothing in its constancy, a gentle, unending murmur that seems to speak without words. You watch as droplets splash lightly against the stone and send little beads of moisture scattering, catching the lamplight for an instant before fading back into darkness. The rhythm of the water, steady and patient, feels like something you could listen to for a very long time without growing tired, the way one might watch a fire or the movement of clouds. A few clay jugs are lined up along the base of the wall, empty for now, their mouths tilted upward as if waiting for the morning when hands will come to fill them. Each jug bears its own history of small chips and stains, but they still stand sturdy and ready for use. You imagine people arriving at dawn, laughing softly as they take their places, sharing bits of news and concern while the basins fill. The fountain does not care whether the conversations are joyful or troubled, it continues its work, simply and reliably, a steady kindness in the life of the city. You dip your fingers into the water, feeling its coolness wrap immediately around your skin. The sensation is vivid but not startling, a clean clarity that seems to draw away a thin layer of weariness from your fingertips and leave behind a subtle tingling presence. When you lift your hand again, droplets fall back into the basin, each small splash merging with the larger sound. For a moment you stand there, eyes half closed, listening to the interplay of water and breath, stone and silence. Until the boundary between these things begins to blur gently in your awareness. Stepping out of the fountain house, you feel the night air wrap around you once again, and the coolness from the water lingers like a quiet blessing along your skin. The lane now takes you gently upward, bending toward a low rise from which you can see more of the city spread out beneath the Acropolis. This climb is not steep, and your feet fall into a natural rhythm, your steps syncing with the ebb and flow of your breath, each inhalation and exhalation a small, unhurried wave in the sea of the night. As you ascend, you pass a gymnasium, its courtyard walls visible as a rectangle of deeper shadow. By day, this place would ring with the sounds of training, feet striking the ground, bodies colliding in practice, shouts of encouragement, the low hum of conversation in the shaded colonnades. Now, it lies still, its sanded practice area empty, the equipment stacked or leaning quietly against the walls. Perhaps a few slow-burning lamps still glow in the inner rooms, tended by a watchful servant, but from where you walk, it might as well be a resting animal, its strength folded inward until dawn calls it back to motion. Nearby, a small palestra opens onto the street, its doorway partially visible behind a hanging curtain that stirs slightly in the breeze. The scent here is faint but distinct, a mix of oil, dust, and sweat that has seeped into the materials over long usage, softened now by the cool night air into something almost abstract. You can imagine young men earlier in the day, rubbing oil onto their skin, stretching and laughing, then washing away dirt and effort at the end of their exercises, their bodies reflecting the sun. Tonight none of that remains except an echo, a ghost of exertion lying peacefully within the stone. At the top of the incline, you pause, letting your eyes roam over the cityscape. The Acropolis rises higher now, closer, its rocky sides forming a great dark wedge against the sky. The temples atop it are more distinct, their outlines clear even in the dimness, columns standing in silent rows like guardians who do not sleep. Between you and that sacred height, the city sprawls in a loose web of houses, courtyards, alleys, and small public spaces, all subdued by the night into shades of gray and deep blue. Lights appear here and there like embers in a banked fire, spaced irregularly, each one a quiet declaration that someone is still awake, still tending some small flame of their own. You feel, faintly, a sense of being part of something large yet gentle, a living organism at rest, breathing slowly, its individual cells curled within their walls. You, with your lamp and your awareness, are one of those cells, moving through the sleeping body of the city not as an intruder but as a dream, a soft wandering thought that passes through different parts, touching them lightly and leaving no wound. The night accepts your presence without resistance, and you, in turn, accept the night, letting its calm seep further into the spaces inside you that were still tense or restless. As you continue, the path leads you past a sculptor's workshop, its entrance a broad doorway partially shielded by a heavy cloth that hangs silently now. From within comes the faint smell of stone dust, that dry, chalky scent that lingers long after chisels and mallets have fallen silent. Curious, You draw a little closer, lifting the edge of the cloth just enough to let your lamplight slip inside without disturbing the stillness. The workshop interior reveals itself in soft fragments. On a low table near the entrance, tools rest in neat rows, chisels of different widths, a mallet whose wooden handle bears the polished sheen of long use, a brush stiff with dried dust. Against the far wall, partially draped statues stand in various stages of completion. One is only a rough block with the faintest suggestion of human form emerging from it, as if a figure is still in the process of remembering how to step out of the stone. Another is more finished, a draped figure whose garments fall in carefully carved folds, the face still only sketched in, the eyes blank and waiting for the careful attention that will bring them depth. Your lamp's glow runs along the curves of marble, finding subtle differences between polished surfaces and rougher, newly cut areas. In some places, fine white dust still clings to the floor and lower parts of the statues, forming a thin, frost-like layer that's sparkling faintly under the light. It is easy to imagine the room earlier, filled with the sharp ring of metal on stone, small fragments flying, the sculptor stepping back, head tilted, to judge proportions. Now, that active, searching energy has withdrawn, leaving behind a quiet that feels almost reverent. The unfinished statues stand like figures caught mid-thought, their silence adding to the peacefulness rather than breaking it. You do not step fully inside, instead, you remain at the threshold, letting your gaze travel slowly from one form to another. Each piece, even in its incomplete state, carries within it a vision that has begun to emerge, a conversation between the artist and the stone that is temporarily paused, not ended. You find something comforting in this suspended moment, the understanding that not everything must be finished at once, that there is space for gradual revelation, for work that unfolds over time like a long, patient breath. Lowering the cloth back into place, you return to the lane, the faint dust smell still lingering in your nose. The memory of those half-formed figures walks beside you for a while, mixing with the images of streets, shrines, and fountains you have already passed. All of them, in their own ways, feel like expressions of the same underlying impulse, to shape the world gently, to create spaces, objects, and images that hold and reflect the quiet desires of the human heart. The road begins to curve again toward the slopes that cradle the southern side of the Acropolis, where a cluster of small sanctuaries, theaters, and terraces lie layered against the rock. Even though the larger gatherings and performances are reserved for daylight or early evening, the spaces remain, their forms etched into stone and earth, their presence accessible to the moon and stars as much as to the sun. You find your steps moving in that direction, drawn toward the idea of stone seats and open air, of a place designed for listening. As you approach, the ground underfoot becomes more structured, with shallow steps carved into the hillside leading down into a gently curving hollow. You descend them slowly, your lamp illuminating each step just before your foot finds it, revealing the smooth, slightly worn surfaces shaped by the passage of many soles. The gentle arc of the seating area spreads out before you, rows of stone benches rising in tiers, all facing a central space that serves as a stage, though now it is merely a darker oval within the wider darkness. You pause partway down and turn to look up at the rising rows. In the night, the theater feels more like a bowl carved from the earth, a hollow space that gathers sound and silence alike into its center. You imagine how voices would carry here, even without the aid of any artifice, rising from the stage and climbing naturally up the stone, reaching the furthest seats without strain. Tonight, there are no actors, no chorus, no audience, and yet the place holds a distinct sense of anticipation, as if it remembers the stories that have unfolded here and waits calmly for those yet to come. Walking down to the level area of the stage, you stand at its center and remain still for a moment, your lamp at your side. The air feels slightly cooler in this low, open space, and the night sky above seems vast, framed only by the rising curve of the seating and the dark silhouette of the Acropolis rock beyond. You whisper a single word, not any word of great significance, just a gentle greeting to the space, and you hear, faintly, the way the sound travels, touches the stone, and returns to you in a softened echo. It's as if the theater is acknowledging your presence with a quiet nod. You do not linger long in the center. Instead, you choose one of the lower stone benches and sit, letting the cool surface press against you, steadying you in the open quiet. Your lamp sits on the step below, its light spilling upward and catching the front edges of the seat, leaving the rest in comforting shadow. You gaze upward toward the highest rows, where the darkness thickens, and beyond them to the sky, where the stars mark out their slow, inscrutable patterns. The city, for all its busy concerns, is part of a much larger pattern too, you realize, and this thought, rather than overwhelming you, feels oddly soothing. Everything, from your small flame to the shining temples above, seems to belong where it is, watched over by the patient eyes of the night. After sitting there in the embrace of the stone seats for some time, you rise again, body moving almost of its own accord, guided by the natural arc of the night's unfolding. The steps lead you gently back up toward the terraces and paths that wind along the hillside, and soon you find yourself on a narrow way that offers glimpses both toward the city below and toward the sacred precincts above. Here, shrines and small buildings cluster like quiet companions along the route, some more elaborate, others little more than simple, dignified boxes of stone. You pass one such building whose doorway is framed by two slender columns, their capitals modestly decorated. A relief carving above the lintel shows a figure leading an animal, perhaps a sacrificial scene once so vivid in paint that even a glance in passing would have told its story clearly. Now, in the dim light of your lamp, it appears in soft, flattened lines, the details blurred by time, the narrative reduced to a gentle curve of arm and head, a hint of movement frozen in the stone's patient memory. You pause to look up at it, feeling a quiet respect not only for the subject but for the hands that carved it, who, like you, lived beneath this same hill and same sky. Further along, a grove of small trees gathers around a terrace, their branches intertwining overhead in a loose canopy. The smell of leaves and faint traces of recent offerings, perhaps crushed herbs or a libation of sweet wine, lingers in the air. In the center of the terrace, a simple altar slab stands, its surface marked by shallow grooves where liquids have poured and dried many times over. You can see the different textures where the stone has been worn by weather versus by the touch of human hands, and in that difference you read a kind of dialogue between the world's slow forces and the quicker, more fleeting gestures of people. You do not perform any ritual. This night is not about grand acts, but about quiet companionship with the sleeping city. Still, as you pass the altar, you allow one small drop of oil from your lamp's edge to fall onto the surface, where it gleams briefly before beginning to spread and vanish into the stone. It is a tiny gesture, almost invisible, yet in it there lies a soft offering of your own presence, a silent acknowledgement that you are part of this long, continuous thread of feet, hands, and hearts that have moved through these spaces. The path bends again, and the view opens suddenly onto a broad overlook from which you can see both the faint line of the sea in the distance and the denser weave of houses closer at hand. The city's shapes are softened by the darkness, their edges blurred, but you can still make out the major forms, the agora where you walked earlier, the clusters of workshops and dwellings, the smaller hills rising and falling in gentle humps of shadow. Lights marking doorways and windows seem fewer now, as more people succumb to sleep, yet those that remain glow with a quiet determination, like stars mirrored upon the earth. You stand there, lamp in hand, feeling something in you mirror that same gentle glow, a steady, calm warmth that does not shout but simply exists. As the night deepens, the air cools another small degree, and you draw your free hand closer to your body, enjoying the mild contrast between the chill of your fingertips and the warmth of the lamp's side. Your path turns inward again, leading you away from the broad overlook and into another series of lanes that meander down the slopes toward quieter quarters. These paths, less formal than the main routes, seem almost to have grown on their own, following the contours of the land and the habits of feet, rather than any strict plan. You descend slowly, and as you do, the sounds of the night shift subtly. Distant voices become rarer. Instead you hear more of the small noises that always accompany life, the chirp of an insect hidden among stones, the tiny rustle of something moving through dry leaves, the occasional, soft thud of an olive dropping from a branch and landing in unseen grass. From one nearby courtyard comes the faintest hint of music, no more than a few notes plucked from a stringed instrument, uncertain and slow, as if someone, not yet ready for sleep, is letting their fingers wander absent-mindedly over familiar strings. The melody does not form into anything complete, it simply rises once or twice, then fades again into the enveloping quiet. You come to a house where the main doorway stands slightly ajar, a warm strip of light crossing the threshold and spilling onto the street. You do not look in directly, instead, you let your eyes slide gently past, respecting the boundary between your wandering and another household's intimate world. Out of the corner of your vision, you catch the suggestion of figures inside, perhaps someone sitting near a hearth, perhaps another spreading out bedding for the night, smoothing cloth with habitual, careful motions. A quiet murmur of conversation reaches you, but the words are indistinct, like water flowing just beyond a bend in a stream. As you pass, a small dog lifts its head from where it lies near the door. Its eyes reflect your lamplight briefly, two small, shining points in the shadow, then it emits a soft huff of breath and lays its head back down, deciding that you pose no threat worthy of disturbing its rest. The simple, untroubled acceptance in that gesture makes you smile inwardly. In this city, you are just one more familiar shape moving through a world that knows how to sleep without fear. For a moment, you feel a kinship with the dog, with the unseen humans inside, with all the creatures that share these streets, all of you held together by the same gentle darkness and the same great, watchful sky. Your steps continue downward, your body following the gentle pull of the slope as naturally as water follows a channel. The lamps of the houses seem to grow sparser here, and your own small flame stands out more sharply against the thickening shadows. Yet you do not feel alone. The city itself feels like a companion, its stones and walls, its trees and fountains, all quietly aware of your passing, not in a sentient way, but in the way that familiar places receive and welcome a returning presence. After some time, you arrive at a modest open space where three streets meet, a kind of small, informal plaza shared by nearby homes. In its center stands a simple, circular stone platform that once may have supported a larger monument, but now holds only a large, weathered jar filled with earth and a thriving cluster of plants. By day, perhaps, neighbors gather here to talk, children run around the base, and someone occasionally tends to the plants, pulling away dried leaves and giving water. At night, the space feels like the pause between breaths, a place where movement naturally slows and thoughts become softer. You set your lamp on the edge of the stone platform and take a seat beside it, your body grateful for the rest. The plants in the jar are not grand, just hardy herbs and a few trailing vines, but their scent rises gently in the cool air, an earthy, green note that mingles with the faint smells of dust and distant smoke. One of the vines has found its way down the side of the jar and across the stone, its small tendrils exploring tiny cracks, its leaves unfurling with quiet persistence. You reach out and touch one leaf lightly. It is cool and slightly rough, its veins barely perceptible under your fingertips. Looking around, you see the facades of the surrounding houses, their doors and windows closed, their outlines softened by darkness. Above them, the sky opens in a round patch framed by rooflines, a perfect little window into the larger universe. The stars here seem particularly bright, unchallenged by nearby light, and as you gaze up, you can almost feel your awareness expanding, stretching gently outward from your body to fill that circle of sky. You imagine how many nights people have looked up from this very spot, with concerns and hopes of their own, and how the stars have watched them all with the same steady, patient light. Your breathing has become slow and deep, your chest rising and falling in a rhythm that feels synchronized with the calm around you. The tension that might have remained in your shoulders or jaw has dissolved, replaced by a soft heaviness that is not burdensome, but restful, like a blanket laid over tired muscles. Time seems to lose some of its edges here, minutes slide quietly into one another without urgency, and you lose track of how long you sit, listening to the faint, almost inaudible hum of the sleeping houses and the ever-present whisper of the night breeze moving through distant trees. When at last you lift the lamp again, its handle familiar in your hand, you do so with the unhurried grace of someone who knows that there is no need to rush. The night is still generous with its hours, and your path, wherever it leads next, will unfold in the same soft, welcoming darkness that has carried you this far. As your wandering begins to gently bend back toward the direction from which you came, you notice that some of the lamps in the distance have now gone dark, extinguished as their keepers finally surrender to sleep. The city feels even more hushed, the remaining lights like scattered islands in a vast, calm sea. Your own lamp seems a little brighter now by contrast, its flame a small, steadfast star close at hand, guiding your steps along the familiar yet ever-new combination of stone, earth, and shadow. You come once more within sight of the agora, but this time you do not enter its open expanse. Instead, you walk along one of its quieter edges, where the boundary between public and private spaces blurs, with small shops and simple dwellings leaning toward the great square. In one shuttered stall, you glimpse baskets stacked neatly, ready for the morning's wares. Another holds shelves lined with empty jars and amphorae, their rounded shapes outlined faintly in your lamplight. You imagine the quick, practiced hands that will lift and fill them when the sun returns, transforming this stillness back into movement and noise. By now, your mind no longer paints elaborate pictures of the day, the scenes are simpler, less detailed, more like the gentle impressions that float through the edge of sleep. You notice textures more than narratives, the roughness of a door's wooden grain under your fingers as you steady yourself, the cool hardness of a stone corner when your hand brushes it in passing, the faint give of packed earth under your sandals compared to the unyielding smoothness of carved steps. Each contact grounds you gently in this place, yet at the same time loosens your attachment to any particular thought, allowing your awareness to drift like a leaf on a slow current. The Acropolis is still visible above, but you look up at it less often now. It has become part of the background of your experience, an ever-present guardian that you no longer need to check on. Its temples, its rock, its long history all rest quietly in your mind as a single, calm shape, like a hand laid reassuringly on your shoulder. You feel your focus turning more inward, toward the rhythms of your own body, the steady beating of your heart, slow and firm, the gentle movement of your breath, the subtle, pleasant heaviness in your limbs that suggests you are ready, whenever you choose, to lie down and let sleep come. Your path now leads gradually back toward the quarter where you began, the streets becoming more familiar, the turns more easily anticipated even in the dim light. A few landmarks signal your approach, a particular crack in a wall that you notice again. A fig tree whose silhouette you recognize, the faint profile of a herm at a crossroads, its worn features greeting you now as an old acquaintance. You feel no sharp sense of arrival, only a soft recognition, as if you have been following a long, gentle circle that is now closing in the most natural way. When you re-enter the small courtyard with the fig tree near your dwelling, it feels subtly different, although nothing obvious has changed. The same basin rests at the tree's roots, reflecting a tiny fragment of your lamplight. The same bench waits under the eaves, still empty, still holding the marks of earlier days. Yet the atmosphere has deepened somehow, as if your journey through the city has enriched this familiar space with all the quiet impressions you have gathered: shrines and stone seats, workshops and fountains, altars and sleeping houses. They all seem to follow you here, not as clutter, but as a soft, invisible layer of meaning. You pause beneath the fig's dark canopy, and a breeze moves through the leaves, making them whisper the same gentle sound you heard on the hillside and in other courtyards. One leaf detaches and falls, its slow descent barely audible, landing somewhere in the shadows with a sound too faint for your ears to catch. You realize that the same breeze that touched you at the edge of the agora, that moved the cloth over the sculptor's doorway, that stirred the curtain at the palestra's entrance, is here as well, tying all those places together in a single, flowing presence. This realization is not an intellectual conclusion, it is felt more like a soft warmth spreading through your chest. Near one doorway, a small clay toy lies forgotten, perhaps a child's, perhaps dropped in the rush to go inside when the night grew cool. It is shaped like a tiny cart or animal, its edges rounded by many small hands. You stoop to pick it up for a moment, feeling the smoothness against your palm, the slight imperfections that give it character. Then, without much thought, you set it gently on the bench, where it will be easier to see in the morning. This simple act completes a little circle of care that began earlier in the day, and you feel a quiet satisfaction in knowing that the toy will not be stepped on or lost in the darkness. The door to your dwelling stands just ahead, its outline familiar now not only in shape but in the way it holds a particular patch of shadow. You approach it with no sense of urgency, only with the same calm inevitability that has guided every step of your walk. The city will continue to breathe around you as you sleep, stones shifting minutely with changes in temperature, night creatures moving along their small paths, the Acropolis standing watch. You feel ready to join that rest, to become another quiet part of the city's great, gentle stillness. Inside, the room receives you with a softness that feels deeper after the open spaces and cooler air outside. The lamp's light expands against the familiar walls, revealing the same simple furnishings: the low table, the stool, the sleeping pallet, yet each seems touched now by a subtle glow from within, as though they have been quietly waiting for your return. The air here holds traces of oil and cloth, of the day's faint odors that have settled into calm. You set your lamp down, and its circle of light steadies itself over the center of the room like a small sun that has chosen to linger. You move through the room slowly, not because you are unsure of where things are, but because each action has taken on the unhurried rhythm of the night. You straighten a folded cloth, feeling its weave under your fingertips. You adjust the position of a clay cup so that it rests fully on the table's surface. You set down whatever small items you carried with you, letting them find their place in the quiet order of the space. None of these gestures is necessary in any urgent sense, yet each one seems to align your surroundings with the expansive calm you carry back from your walk. When you sit on the edge of your sleeping pallet, the straw-stuffed mattress yields slightly under your weight, its familiar creak accompanied by a faint rustle of fabric. The sensation of sinking into this support is deeply comforting, like being received by something that knows your shape. You reach for the lamp and draw it a little closer, watching the flame bend and then return to upright as it moves. The shadows in the room respond, gathering in the corners and along the floor, but in a way that feels friendly, like soft animals curling into themselves for rest. Your body is pleasantly heavy now, your muscles loosened by both walking and sitting, by the cool air and the gentle work of breathing. You become acutely aware of the contact points between your body and the pallet, the backs of your legs, your calves, the parts of your feet still touching the ground. Each point feels anchored, steady, and yet not trapped. Instead, there is a sense that the earth itself, beneath the house, beneath the city, is bearing your weight with infinite patience. Above, the stars you saw from the street still shine, though you no longer see them, and the temples on the hills still stand, though they are now only inner images. You hold all of this lightly in your awareness, and it lulls you into an even deeper state of ease. When you finally lie down fully, stretching your legs and letting your back meet the pallet, a long breath escapes you of its own accord, sliding out in a slow sigh that seems to carry with it the last remnants of the day's tension. You feel the length of your body from heels to crown, a single, continuous line resting along the surface. The blanket you draw over yourself presses lightly against your limbs and torso, its weight gentle and reassuring. The fabric's texture, slightly coarse yet familiar, brushes against your skin in a way that makes you more aware of your contours, then gradually less, as your focus shifts inward. The lamp still burns beside you, its flame smaller now as the oil has slowly diminished, but its light is enough. You watch it for a while as it performs its small, tireless dance, rising and dipping, thinning and swelling in place. Each flicker sends new patterns of shadow across the walls, but the changes are slow, subtle, and repetitive, like ripples at the edge of a still pool. Your eyes follow them until the distinction between one pattern and the next becomes less important. What remains is the feeling of movement within safety, of change contained within a steady, unchanging frame. Your breathing has become very slow, each inhale entering not just your lungs, but the entire space of your body, each exhale emptying you in a way that feels cleansing yet not effortful. You imagine, just for a moment, that with every breath you are drawing in the night air of Athens, the coolness from the hillside shrines, the faint sweetness from the fig tree courtyards, the mineral clarity from the fountain house, and sending out, in return, a soft, invisible steam of your own warmth, your own presence, which joins the city's unseen atmosphere. You are not separate from it, you are one more quiet pulse in its sleeping heart. The sounds around you have almost entirely faded. Perhaps, if you listen very closely, you might still hear a distant murmur from another room, the slightest creak from a beam adjusting as the air cools further, or the far-off whisper of wind brushing past the house. But these do not stand out, they blend into a single, continuous hush that supports your drifting thoughts the way water supports a floating leaf. Nothing presses in, nothing demands attention. The night is no longer something outside your walls, it has become a soft, expansive presence inside you as well. At some point, you turn your head slightly to look once more at the lamp. Its flame is smaller now, reduced to a slender, steady tongue of light that almost seems to waver more from its own exhaustion than from any movement of air. You know that before long, it will go out on its own, leaving the room to the pure darkness of night. There is no anxiety in this knowledge, you trust the darkness here. It is the same darkness that filled the peaceful streets, that embraced the shrines, the fountains, the workshops and theaters. It is not an emptiness to be feared, but a great, soft cloak under which the city rests. You decide to help the lamp along its natural course. With a slow, deliberate movement, you reach out and gently pinch the wick, or perhaps cover the flame with a small cap, whatever method is most familiar to your hand. The light flutters once more in response, then surrenders, withdrawing into a brief glow of ember before vanishing completely. For a moment, your eyes perceive the afterimage of its brightness against the dark, a phantom flame that fades softly, leaving behind a depth of shadow that seems almost tangible. In the darkness that follows, you are surprised not by what you cannot see, but by how clearly you can still feel. The outline of the room remains in your awareness, the walls, the table, the door, the space above you. You feel the weight of the blanket, the support of the pallet, the coolness of the air on your face. The absence of light heightens your sense of touch, of breath, of inner quiet. You realize that the city outside your walls is steeped in this same darkness, that every house, every courtyard, every shrine is now wrapped in it, and that this shared condition links you gently with all of Athens. Your mind, which earlier traced paths through streets and sanctuaries, now turns its wandering inward. Images still arise, a column lit by moonlight, a ripple spreading across a fountain basin, a half-finished statue shrouded in dust, but they come more slowly, with softer edges, and they linger less insistently. They are like guests who have said their goodbyes and are now lingering only at the threshold, ready to leave whenever your attention releases them. You do not push them away, you simply watch as they drift off, one by one, into the same darkness that now fills the room. Gradually, even those images thin out, replaced by simpler sensations. You become aware of your heartbeat as a gentle, regular presence, a quiet drum deep within your chest, steady and reassuring. Your breath feels wider, as if each inhalation expands not only your lungs but the space within your mind, and each exhalation smooths that space like a hand passing over still water. Your limbs feel heavy yet free, no longer asking to move, content to rest exactly where they are. The boundary between where your body ends and where the bedding begins becomes less distinct, as if the pallet is slowly rising around you, cradling you in its support. You think, perhaps, of the city once more. You imagine the Acropolis standing silently above, the temples on its summit lost now to your sight but still present in the night, their columns cool and still. You imagine the agora lying quiet and spacious, the stoa's columns like a row of sleeping sentinels, the stone benches and altars waiting calmly for the sun. You picture the fountain's lion-head spout pouring unceasingly into the basin, water continuing its eternal song even when no one listens. In each of these places, you see the same essential stillness you feel inside yourself, a rest that is not absence but fullness without motion. As these thoughts arise, they almost immediately sink again, dissolving into the steady rhythm of breath and heartbeat. Your inner world and the outer world seem to align in a single, slow movement toward deeper rest. There is no sharp line marking the passage from wakefulness to sleep, instead, it feels like gradually floating downward through layers of quiet, each one softer, dimmer, more spacious than the last. You are not falling, you are drifting, borne along by currents so gentle you hardly notice them except in retrospect. The last thing you are clearly aware of is the sensation of being held, by your bedding, by the walls of your small room, by the broader embrace of the sleeping city, by the vast bowl of night that curves over Athens and all its sleeping inhabitants. It is a layered security, each level resting upon the next, until the entire structure rests, finally, upon something so wide and still that you cannot name it, only trust it. Into that nameless stillness you sink, gently and completely, as the ancient city breathes quietly around you, the sacred hill watching over you like a patient guardian as you drift, without effort, into deep and peaceful sleep.